Chapter 1 of Civics deals with America's political heritage. The three sections of this chapter teach you the foundations and the sources of the traditions that we use today in our government. Hence the title of the chapter, America's Political Heritage. The word heritage means traditions, customs that are passed down from generation to generation. Political is the functions of government. So we're going to be taking a look at where the traditions that we use in our government came from, that we still use today. Information that you should know before going into this chapter deals with the 13 American colonies. The 13 American colonies were right here on the east coast of North America. These were colonies of Great Britain. Great Britain also had colonies in Central America, in South America, in Africa, and in Asia, which is on the other side of this globe. The purpose of the colonies was basically to make money for the mother country, Great Britain, found here. The colonies would provide resources, crops, minerals to England, which England would then take and redistribute to its own citizens and throughout the world to make a profit on, and the colonies were a source of tax revenue. The colonists that resided in the 13 American colonies had certain rights that most colonists did not have in other colonies throughout the world of Great Britain. One of the main things that they could do is vote, and they could vote for their own local legislatures. A legislature is a group of people that are chosen to make the laws. Each colony had its own legislature. Each legislature would meet, and this is the Virginia House of Burgesses of 1619, the first legislature in the colonies. And the men would meet to make the laws for each colony. The men, also known as representatives of each legislature, were chosen by the colonists. The colonists elected men who shared their opinions and viewpoints on political issues in hopes that those men would represent them and vote to create laws that they themselves agree with. We do the same thing today when we vote for senators and House members at the federal and state levels of government. We vote for men who share our opinions because we hope that they would vote how we would vote if we had worked in a representative body. And the men would meet and they would make the laws for each colony. These men did not take their power in government through tyranny or abuse. They were chosen by the people. This tradition has carried forward until today. Another tradition is the tradition of participating in government through voting. Now, in the past, during colonial times, which would be the 15 and 1600s, if you were white and a male and had a certain amount of land, you could vote. This right will develop more as the history of our country progresses to include women and different ethnic groups and rich and poor alike, but for the time being in the colonies, these were the only people that could vote if you were white, male, and had a certain amount of land. Same is true for holding office. Another tradition was working for the common good, which we still see today. Working for the common good means that you work together and you do things that help the community. Hence the word common. This included jury duty, volunteering for the local militia or volunteer army, which kind of supplemented for police forces that we have today, which they did not have back then, and supporting education and reading. Another root of our freedom that was originally part of the colonies was the idea of freedom of religion. The Puritans were a group of religious people, Christians, that lived in Great Britain who were persecuted, which means they were not permitted to believe and worship how they pleased, and they were punished for this. To get away from this, they came to the colonies and set up the colony of Massachusetts. Ironically, though, this same group of people who left England to start religious freedom in the New World also denied it to other people. You were not allowed to reside in their colony if you were not a Puritan. One man, Roger Williams, was Catholic, and he was not permitted to reside in Massachusetts. As a Catholic, he decided to start the colony of Rhode Island, right here, which would allow religious freedom to all Christians. Christianity includes Puritans, evangelicals, Catholics, Protestants, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Methodists, and many, many, many other branches. His colony would allow all of those branches. In contrast, the Puritans only permitted Puritans in their colony. Roger Williams built on the idea of religious freedom by opening the door to all different groups of Christians. He wasn't perfect though, because he did not allow people who followed Judaism or people who might have been Islamic or Buddhist or Hindu, only Christians. But you can see how the idea grows in the colonies, and the foundation is set, and we build on that throughout history. The final part of our political heritage that had its foundations in the colonies is freedom of the press. Freedom of the press, I think, is one of the most important rights, because it allows the common people like myself to stay informed through simply going and picking up a newspaper, and nowadays looking up newspapers online. I want to know that the people that are in charge, the people that are running this country, are being lawful, and that they are not taking advantage to further themselves individually. They are public servants. They were chosen by the people to create a government that works for the people. The freedom of the press originated because in the colonies, each colony had a royal governor, and the royal governor was appointed by the English monarch all the way on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. The people did not choose the royal governors. The royal governors were put in each colony to keep an eye on the colonists for the king, to make sure that they were not going against English law, to make sure that they were not planning rebellions, because England was so far away, it was very difficult for the king to keep tabs on the people. So his royal governors were there to watch them, and these royal governors were not law-abiding men. They took advantage of the colonists. They stole money. They took tax money. So one particular instance dealt with the governor of New York. His name was William Cosby, and I always remember his name because I grew up watching Bill Cosby. But William Cosby was stealing money and funds from the taxpayers of New York, and this was published in a newspaper which was owned and circulated by a German immigrant known as John Peter Zenger. And the royal governor was not happy with this, so he put John in jail, and he told him that you are not allowed to print negative information about royal government officials. And John Peter Zenger's lawyer was Andrew Hamilton, and at the trial, Andrew Hamilton said that if what John Peter Zenger had printed was false, then John Peter Zenger would have been guilty of what we call libel. And libel is when you print false information about somebody. You lie, but you print it and circulate it. But case in point, Hamilton said what John Peter Zenger had printed was true. The New York governor was stealing money, and he had every right to print that in the newspaper, because the public should be informed of what their government officials are doing so that they can stop them if they're doing something illegal and something that hurts the community. So he was found innocent, because what he had printed was the truth, and that still holds true today. That is a big part of our tradition. The people are entitled to know if their government is doing something that it should not be doing, because we have the right to stop them and replace them with people that are honest. Now, gradually, the colonists start to be discontent, because they're fed up with the royal governors abusing their power. They are noticing that England is starting to tighten their reins on them, where in the past they had the right to have a legislature. They had the right to vote for the people that made their laws, instead of just being subject to whatever laws the king wanted them to follow. England starts to tighten the reins more and more and more, because mainly they had just gotten finished fighting a war with France, known as the French and Indian War, and they needed to make money back because that war was very expensive. So they start coming and looking to the colonies and taxing them more. And the colonists, who up to this point have enjoyed a sense of independence by electing their own legislatures and having somewhat freedom of press and freedom of religion, they're not happy with this. So it starts to ignite a spark between England and the colonists and a power struggle, and which eventually we know leads to the American Revolution.